What quietly went away without anyone noticing? Richard Simmons. I have no idea what this is about or if he's a missing person, but this man scares the out of me. Something about him terrifies me down deep to my core. If I saw him on the street, I'm sure I'd break down crying immediately. I don't know why, cannot explain it, but I'm glad I've heard nothing about him for a while now. I hope it stays that way. Acid rain. It was a huge environmental issue in the late 70s through the early 90s. Rain was acidic and damaged fertile areas, among other things. In the US, there was much research done, and eventually industrial regulations were put into place. Companies were allowed to decide what approach they chose to take, as long as the results showed the appropriate amount of reduction in sulfur dioxide emissions. Unfortunately, positive news doesn't sell, so news outlets did not do justice to reporting this success. As we went into the 2000s, hardly anyone remembered what was done. Climate skeptics actually use acid rain and the ozone layer as proof it's all a lie. They focus on the alarm being raised and nothing bad ever came of it, so it wasn't really a problem they are either ignorant of or intentionally neglect to say it's because we solved it through legislation and regulation. Burning rivers, tire and abandoned car-filled beaches, black soot-covered bug screens on doors and windows, swampy chemical-filled marshlands, horrific amounts of garbage lining the highways and streets. That old Native American chief with the tear rolling down his cheek accomplished his mission in my head. Just in the last year, I don't think I have seen a single plastic bag stuck 50 feet up in a tree. There is a picture of NYC in the late 70s, and in 2015, that is astounding. I recall those smog-ridden summers, and today is so much better. I thank God every day for the EPA. I read a comic in my childhood where acid rain happens and it melts people in the streets. One guy hides beneath his car, but the acid reaches him and he becomes a skeleton. I was terrified why people weren't doing more to stop it, and when I realized what it really meant, I was a little disappointed. It was actually a very successful because regulations and treaties were put in place that had teeth. Same with the ozone layer. If someone tried to weasel around it, they would get punished economically. I remember George Bush Sr. saying the greenhouse effect was going to meet the White House effect. I'm not quite sure what happened after those successes. This is one of those things like the hole in the ozone. Actually saw the other day where someone tried to point to how big a deal that was only for it to quietly disappear as evidence that the pandemic is bull. Someone pointed out that the reason you stopped hearing about it is BC companies actually worked together and reversed the problem. It didn't just disappear magically. Here in the US, EPA still uses it as its market trading model in many of its air regulations to promote faster pollution reduction at a lower price than traditional command and control. The regulated community over-controls using the lowest cost control technology, sells the credits, and ultimately results in low-cost credits and compliance. The compliance costs tend to run way lower than original projections. I am familiar with regulations on gasoline and diesel to reduce SOx emissions, which was a large part of the improvement made. Fuel desulfurization is an excellent improvement, but by no measure were companies in control. The tack that the EPA takes with this industry was direct and uncompromising to the point of being counterproductive. Working in this industry directly out of college, I was so devastated to see how dysfunctional the relationship was. There was so much more room to do good, but the door to communication with environmental agency was slammed shut in our face. Boilermakers built the solutions to acid rain. Before the 2000s, coal-burning power plants and other heavy industries basically churned out the exhaust with very minimal emissions controls. The solution was SCRs, selective catalytic reducers, put in between the boiler or whatever creating the harmful exhaust and the smokestack. Ammonia is sprayed into the flue gas and reacts with the NOx, and you're left with harmless N2 and H20. When you turn off the TV, how the image would shrink to a dot before slowly fading away. Cathode ray tubes. The tube would create a stream of electrons moving from the back to the front. Near the emitter, two pairs of electronic magnets would steer the beam to each pixel. Each pixel was a different chemical that glowed a unique color when struck by an electron. The voltage differential was in the tens of thousands of volts. This differential was what drove the electron stream. When the power was cut, the guiding magnets powered down first. The circuit creating the voltage for the tube had capacitors, so the circuit would take a lot longer to discharge, so the stream would collapse to a point before turning off. The process was also why the screen would build up a static charge. I have a better one related to cathode ray tubes. The high-pitched sound present in every CRT. I refurbish and resell vintage electronics. When I turn on a cathode ray tubes anywhere in the house, my kids complain about the loud high-pitched noise that I can't hear at all. Believe either our people who grew up with tube TVs, brains tune it out, or it's been shaved off the top of our ears' hearing ability. I used a spectrum analyzer on my iPhone, and you can clearly see a spike when a CRT is turned on. You can also make an audio recording and slow it down and bring it down to audible range. It blows my mind that we all lived with this ear-piercing noise since we were born. Honestly, I ended up buying a PVM professional video monitor for retro video games. But I've loaded a hard drive connected to a PS3 with old TV shows and movies I liked as a kid, Simpsons, Futurama, Disney, etc., and I've been watching a lot more TV on it than playing games. Guess I'm kinda nostalgic for the softer look of CRT TVs. It's also the smallest PVM ever made with just a 6-inch screen. Perfect for sitting in between my work monitors and watching some old TV during downtimes. It was really hard to find this now, and I wasn't even allowed to watch it because it's now region locked, but I really feel like they captured the essence of Facebook, even with a lot of the specifics being pretty dated. It's weird now though how the overall use of the platform has changed so much since this. The primary downsides of Facebook that the video sends up are people the very thing that made it a pretty great thing to start off with. That's probably very much still a big part of it, but it's odd how it morphed into a news and shopping platform, and instead of a lot of people you barely know being a problem, there's tons of random strangers following people. Over the holidays, I took my parents to dinner. I was expressing how sad it would be when they eventually pass away one day, and I lose all the little stories and facts that were never written down. And my dad goes, "Oh, I know one. Did you know your mom and I had a waterbed?" I laughed so hard. It seems so ridiculous to me. Imagining my parents, young 20-somethings, barely adults, and they owned a damn waterbed. My parents have had one for like 30 years now, and honestly, it was a highlight of my childhood. Whenever my friends would come over, we'd have fun jumping on it or making waves. If someone was laying really close to the edge of it, and you hit the opposite end hard enough, you could sometimes even send them flying off it. It's hella comfy too. It conforms to your body shape, so no problems with shoulder hurting if you sleep on your side or something without being nearly as hot as a thick memory foam mattress. I take amazing naps on it whenever I go home. I had to have the temperature set exactly right or I'd sweat all night. And it never was right, so my bed permanently smelled like sweat. It was impossible to roll over in it because the top of the mattress moved with me. I had to sort of roll under instead, belly first, heaving my body across the surface with my hands. A bit hard to describe. I did that in my sleep for years after, even after I got a real mattress. Tell you something weird though. I slept on a modern air mattress a while back, and it was the most comfortable thing I've been on. I'm tempted to get one, but I'm not sure how long they last before they get leaky. I and my wife are still sleeping on a waterbed, have been for over 40 years, and we've only spent about $200 on replacement mattresses in that time. And you don't turn the heater off during the day, you just leave it on all the time. And during the summer, you can turn it down a degree or so in spring, and the bed is always cool all summer long. And in fall, you turn it up 1 degree or so, and it's toasty warm all winter long. When I was looking for a house, There was one I went to visit and the guy living there wouldn't let us enter the master bedroom because it needed to stay clean. He was so proud to show off his waterbed and wall-mounted TV from a distance. That was after bragging about the cheap door he got with a bullet hole, showing us a picture of the dog he buried, and seeing the giant mound of beer cans in the backyard. We didn't buy the house. I've had one my whole life, and I love it. I can sleep on the side without messing up my shoulders. I can keep it at a cool temperature to keep me from getting too warm at night. It's wonderful. I had to sleep on a regular mattress for around a year because of a temporary move. And I had to sleep with the window open even in the middle of winter because I was so warm. And my shoulder always hurt when I woke up too. The only downside is you have to refill them and get the air out occasionally. And if your water mattress is old, you can get leaks sometimes. But for me, it's 1000% worth it because it improves the quality of my sleep so much. Man, those were the bomb. 90 seconds reference intended. Back then, parents just had one TV, as did all the neighbors. That was just it. No one had TVs hanging out in every corner of every room. They didn't fit. They were huge and bulky and expensive as far as I know. I was like 7. So when Dad wanted to watch TV, that was it. He took control. But man, picture-in-picture saved me. I could get my Sega turned onto the little picture screen and sit right up close to the TV, burning my eyeballs and count the freaking pixels while I was at it, and still play my video games. I was just talking to some friends about how I always wanted one, and now that I can afford it, I can't find it. I do have an app from my cable provider, so I can watch one show on my phone and another on the TV and switch as needed, but not a solution my wife is comfortable with. I do understand that DVR to some extent has replaced the need, since you can watch one thing and record the others. But the ability to flip away from commercials when watching sports to another game, and switch back to the main one when the commercial is over, is still something I would like. I bought a bag of Cracker Jacks, and there was a car code, or a link to a website that was supposed to have games to play in lieu of a toy. The website was completely broken on both mobile and desktop, no matter what browser I tried. I emailed them and told them about it, along with screenshots and which browsers I had tried. They responded with a thank you, and sent me some coupons for free Cracker Jacks, a Cracker Jack keychain, and a paper with the history of Cracker Jack prizes on it. It was really neat. No idea if they ever fixed the website. Ah yes, back when you would actually get your amusing content directly from individual websites by navigating to them, instead of secondhand from like 4 giant link content aggregators. StumbleButton brought me to some very interesting places, and I don't really know how I would go about finding stuff like that these days. Most websites anymore are for commercial purposes, promotion, that is stores, products, restaurants, services, etc. Or they are discussion using that word loosely based, so content is mostly reposted snippets, discussion of other conversations. Service clubs, the Rotary, the Lions, the Shriners. Oh, they're still around, but a common complaint among them is they've got no members under 70, and no new members are lining up to get in. They're social clubs with the primary objective to be doing projects to better the community. They might raise money to build a new playground, a new hospital, for scholarships, stuff like that. They raise money for stuff. My local Kiwanis Club started a young professionals membership to encourage younger people to join. The problem was that we were all in new jobs in our low mid-20s, and couldn't make the meetings on Thursdays at noon since we had to be at work. They tried to fix that by offering night meetings once per month, but then none of the old people would show up, and anyone who did would rag on the young folks for not showing up to the Thursday noon meetings more often. They refused to change their ways in order to stay relevant. And then they were a bit hostile to anyone young who didn't behave in the exact way they wanted. Tried to join a couple of these types of clubs. Overwhelmingly, they're filled with people who bemoan that youngsters don't want to join, then complain that younger people come in and want to do things to attract other younger people, because they've always done it like that. One had a bridge charity event that cost them more than they raised because everyone in the area who played bridge had died. And when I suggested expanding it to include other board games, told me I was disrespectful to my elders. People don't have the spare time to be dealing with that sort of bull, so I'm sure once all these things die off something new will come along to replace them. What are conspiracy theorists going to do when the Freemasons all die out? I have some family who joined the Masons, and it seemed like a cool thing to hang out and network and do charity events and barbecues with a bunch of guys. But yeah, I think this sort of thing's just aged out with the internet, or people not having enough free time. Which is odd because college fraternities and sororities are exactly the same thing for younger people, but they're still very popular. A few years back, my little girl was diagnosed with a rare condition. We barely had enough money getting by as it was, and she needed lots of treatments over a couple years. Shriners approached us and paid for absolutely everything. The long trips to Spokane, WA, hotel stays, and all medical expenses. Never saw a single bill. Nothing but respect for these charitable organizations. Wish they were more prevalent, and I will always donate what I can to help them. My daughter is fully healthy now as well. Kiwanis is huge in my area, and so, weirdly, are the Toastmasters and Odd Fellows, which aren't really the same kind of org, but whatever. This came up at work not long ago because Kiwanis was in the news again, and all the college-aged kids agreed that the cultish cultural aspects of those groups is a zero-tolerance deal-breaker. If you have costumes or flair, secret handshakes, weird slogans and mottos, special names for, they're absolutely not interested at all. I don't blame them. They're interested in clubs and community service. They don't want to be Kiwanians or Rotarians or see weird decorations at the meeting hall. Landlines in residences. The jacks are still in almost any house, but I rarely see anything plugged in anymore. The only people I can think of with them are all over 60. I live in a rural area and have to pay for landline service to have internet. Since I have to pay for something so stupid, I figured I'd have to get something stupid, so I got the hamburger phone from Juno. Not gonna lie, the landline has come in clutch a few times, and holding a hamburger to your ear is amusing every time. Quality of life. There will be no collapse the way some of these people think of it. It's not going to be like the movie Dawn of the Dead, or whatever, where one day suddenly hits the fan and prices skyrocket and everyone begins to riot and the SS comes marching down the streets to kill everyone. There will be no happening. It's far more insidious than that. Read the poem The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot, and you'll understand. You'll just notice that everyday simple things will become a little more expensive. Everyone's homes and apartments will start to get smaller. Your work hours will get longer, but your pay will decrease. You'll see family and friends less, and find that in time, you care less about them. Every day, you'll find yourself lowering your standards for everything: work, food, relationships, etc. Job security will no longer exist as a concept. You'll notice houses and apartments shrinking. People will start hanging on to clothing longer and longer. Less people will get married. Even less will have children. People will engross themselves in technological distractions and fantasy while never truly experiencing the real world. Whatever dream people used to have about what their lives were going to be will become for them a distant memory. The only thing left for them will be the reality of their debt and their poverty. And every minute of every day they will be told, "You are stupid, ugly, and weak. But together we are free, prosperous, and safe." That is the collapse. The reduction of the American man into a feudal serf, incapable of feeling love or hate, incapable of seeing the pitiful nature of his situation for what it is or recognizing his own self-worth. Jim Carrey kind of quietly retired in April 2022. In April 2022, Carrey announced that he was considering retirement from the film industry, explaining, "I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough." When asked if he would ever come back, his response was, "It depends. If the angels bring some sort of script that's written in gold ink that says to me that it's going to be really important for people to see, I might continue down the road, but I'm taking a break." His last work was Dr. Robotnik in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and an appearance in a music video for The Weeknd, and he has zero work coming listed on his IMDb. I think people have noticed now, but at the time, nobody noticed it was happening. 24-hour stores. I live in a major city, and we don't have a single 24-hour grocery store ever since the pandemic. I used to love to go shopping in the middle of the night. It doesn't matter now as my kids are grown, but when they were young, the only free time had might be extremely late when they were asleep. In my 20 seconds when my kids were under 10, 24 hours gyms were also key. They have also vanished. My town's local, Sears, one of the only ones left in the country, and yes, it's attached to a mall, is finally shutting down, and it's practically apocalyptic. The ceiling tiles are rotting, and it's still lit by 90 seconds fluorescent lights. They've never changed their sign, even though the Sears Corporation changed their logo about 15 years ago. There's a big wall with pictures of ovens on it that days, new appliances coming soon, that's been there before COVID. And the only clothes they have are cheap unbranded knockoffs that they have so little of. They hang the same outfits on different displays over and over, like a video game with limited assets. The American chestnut tree. We sing chestnuts roasting over an open fire every year, and yet never question why we have no chestnuts. All the chestnut trees are dead is why, you see. A girl at my high school got published in the journal Nature for her work in identifying why some chestnut trees, and an emphasis on some. There were like 20 adult ones left in my state by this time survived while everything else died. As I understand, 25% of American forests in the early 1900s were composed of chestnut trees. So going from that to 20 left in the state is a staggering change in 100 years. I was so excited when I was walking with my girlfriend through a forest north of Worcester, Massachusetts, and we noticed these juvenile trees with weird leaves that almost looked like mint or elm leaves, but not quite. We looked it up, and they were all chestnut trees. We were such nerds, going nuts, no pun intended, pointing out there's another, realizing it was maybe a bit of a secret. But then, we got sad, really thinking about how they were all juvenile trees, and that it's quite possible chestnut trees can grow, but never truly mature before they die from disease. Not entirely sure, but we're hopeful they'll make it. Shin v. Martinez Ramirez, the Supreme Court ruling that reversed the 2012 Martinez v. Ryan ruling that protected the right to a fair trial in cases where ineffective assistance of counsel could be argued to have resulted in guilty verdicts that land innocent people on death row. Arizona took a case to the Supreme Court to challenge this, with the state's counsel stating over and over again that innocence is not enough to overturn cases. The Supreme Court agreed with this. In Clarence Thomas's decision ruling, he states that federal courts lack the competence and authority to relitigate a state's criminal case. So, yeah, this ruling not only negates the Supreme Court's previous ruling, it removes remedies for defendants that have not been provided with adequate representation during their trials and afterwards. Basically, it's now up to the defendants to challenge their own counsel's competence during the trial and removes any possibility for ineffective assistance claims to be raised in federal court. Those trailers died around the same time the Og Voice guy died. But what really killed it was Inception. Around that time, movie trailers started getting dark and gritty and nixed the whole voice over gimmick for something new. We can also thank Inception for most trailers using the berm noise as well. Some people want to point out that dramatic and gritty trailers always existed before Don, the Og voiceover guy, who passed away in 2008. I never said they didn't. I said once he died, the gimmick died with him. Inception came out in 2010, and that seemed to kick off the new trend of how trailers were done. Every decade seems to have their own trends, and starting 2020, we've seen a new trend of angsty song remixes with female vocalists slowed down to a metronome of ticking beats. Let's see how long this one sticks around.